So let's do this. I'm gonna work with sorry, I'll probably fall into calling L.A. Paul Laurie because I know her. So L.A. she starts with a thought experiment to get you aware of the issue. So this is a thought experiment. It's designed to be outlandish, so it will trigger your intuitions appropriately. So your friends come to you, and they give you incontrovertible evidence that they can reliably, without fail, do the following: turn you into a vampire. Should you do it? How would you decide? Think about it. Here's the problem. I don't know what the perspective of a vampire is until I become one. I don't know what it's going to be like to have the salience landscape of a vampire. I don't know what kind of self I'm going to be, because once I become a vampire, my preferences, my values, everything's going to change. So I am completely ignorant, perspectivally and participatory. I can't, right? And the only way I can get that perspectival and participatory knowing is if I go through the change. But it's an irreversible change. What do I do? Well, I don't do it. But here's the problem. The ignorance is symmetrical. If I don't do it, I don't know what I'm missing. I literally don't know what I'm missing. Now, I have all kinds of propositions about vampires, but I've just shown you propositional knowledge isn't the same thing as perspectival and participatory. I don't know what it's going to be like to be a vampire. Well, then I won't do it. Well, then you don't know what you're missing. But if I do it, I don't know what I'm going to lose. I don't know what I'm going to lose. So what do I do? And you say, that's ridiculous. I don't care about being a vampire. Well, she's a philosopher. So she gets you this, and you sort of go, yeah, I get that. And then she goes, and you face these decisions all the time. So that takes me to a final note by Agnes Callard. She talks about, in her book Aspiration, this process of where you genuinely undertake the goal of acquiring a value, right? And notice how a value combines your skill, what you find salient, and a change in your identity. Procedural, perspectival, and propositional knowing. So she gives the example of somebody who wants to acquire, they do not currently like classical music, but they want to like classical music. Now, what can motivate them? Not a love of classical music, because you know what they don't have right now? A love of classical music. So what do? Well, they take a music appreciation class, and they go through these exercises that are designed to transform them. And notice what this word appreciation brings with it. It brings with it the notion, right, almost of a sensibility transformation, transforming, again, your salience landscape, what you find salient, what you find relevant. But also transforming your identity, who and what you are. Changing your understanding. Appreciation also carries with it that. And understanding, unlike knowing, the difference between understanding and knowing is, to know is to be able to assert with evidence a proposition. Understanding is to grasp its significance or relevance. Now, why is all this important to Callard? Well, she says, notice what we have to say here. People are going through these processes of gaining an appreciation and transforming themselves, and they can't infer their way through it for all the reasons I've already articulated. So what do? Like I say, well, they're doing all these practices, and they're sort of playing with their salience landscape and playing with their identity. So notice what mindfulness is. It's an attention. It's not an inference practice. It's an attentional practice. You shut off inference, in fact. And what you're doing is using attention to alter your salience landscape and alter your sense of self in a profound and engaged manner. So we need that right away. What else, though? Well, let's go back to L.A. Paul's example. People want to have a kid. What do? Well, they don't just sit there going, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know. Sometimes, people just fall into Darwinian impulse. I get that. But let's say people who are doing it as a decision, not as an impulse. Because you should decide, right? What do? Well, I sort of looked around, and I noticed people doing this sort of bizarre thing. They get a dog. They get a dog, and they'll have family pictures of them and the dog. I was like, whoa. Or, I'm thinking about getting in a romantic relationship with this person. And go on a trip with them. oh, and what's going on there? What's going on is this really interesting thing, and it's actually the key to development, because this is how children primarily go through those changes we were talking about. This is enacted play. It's serious play. Like when we use the word play when we're talking about playing music. It's enacted play. And you say, well, adults don't do that. Oh, you better not say that. Because one of the things that's growing right now, for example, in Norwegian countries that are really facing the bite of kind of a very successful in many ways secularism, and I'm not dissing that, but there's a bit of a backlash to that success. This meaning crisis, that if you ask me a single question about this right now, I'll be talking for 7 hours, so I'm not going to go into the meaning crisis. Right? Watch my series, please. Okay, anyways. What they do, they have live action role playing. You know role-playing games like Dungeons and Dragons, but in live action you act it out. Right? They have a thing called Jeep form. So Jeep form is, instead of a dungeon master and you're rolling dice, you're acting out you're acting out a scene, and the dungeon master is like a director, and the director will set up the scene, cut the scene, get you to switch roles, suddenly give you this and say, this is a gun, what are you going to do with it? Stuff like that. And you have to act it out. And here's what you're after when you do this. So you're acting out some situation, you're after the phenomena bleed. You're trying to get so that what's happening in the act, the play, bleeds over to a real problem in your real life, where you're considering going through a huge transformation. You're trying to play like right? You're trying to play with a new participatory identity. You're trying to play, what does it feel like? What's it like to have that perspective? What it's like to be that person, but I'm not fully committed yet. You engage in inactive, serious play. So now I can give you what I think the view from above is doing. We need something that's attentional, that's altering our sense of salience, our sense of self, getting into the perspectival and the participatory knowing. It's going to manipulate perspective and our sense of self. That's what the view from above is doing. It is going to alter what we consider significant or relevant. That's what the view from above is doing. It's a form of serious enacted play. That's what the view from above is doing. And it's rational, even though it doesn't involve inference, proposition, or argumentation.